Okay, I wasn't going to do this, but what the hell? I'm going to make a pitch for the film that I consider to be the greatest ever made. And I have seen many films, including many other films that have that attached to them. The film I'm going to talk about is Titanic. Now, before I get into this, by the way, no copyright infringement intended. The intellectual property belongs entirely to 20th Century Fox and Paramount. No copyright infringement intended there. A few disclaimers. This is my opinions, but they're opinions shared by a lot of people. So I'm not sort of saying you have to agree with me. And I don't mean any disrespect to any of the other films that I will name in this video, which may well be the favourites of people watching this. Um, I'll keep the comment section open, but please keep it respectful. Ultimately, this is about opinions. It's not, you know, not something to get heated about. Um, because this is the sort of thing that surprisingly can get people worked up. Um, this film really needs no introduction. It's one of the most famous films ever made. At the time, it was a record breaker. It was released, like I said, by 20th Century Fox and Paramount, directed by James Cameron. If you told me 20 years ago the guy that directed Terminator, well, 25 years ago, was going to direct a historic epic, I wouldn't have believed it was the same man. And I still find it quite hard to believe that Terminator and Titanic were directed by the same person, but there you go. Um, an interesting thing about James Cameron, while I'm on that subject, is he has had a long interest in maritime issues and oceanography. And I think that was one of the key ingredients for making this so successful, is that the director had a personal interest in the subject matter. It wasn't just that he thought it would make a good film. I mean, Cameron, my God, what a life he has had. He is one of only a very, very, very small handful of people who have been to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. More people have been to space than have been to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, and James Cameron is one of them. So he really knows his stuff when it comes to oceanography and shipwrecks. Um, I remember seeing the film back in 1997. I watched it a few days ago for my birthday with my father. Um, my family's always had an interest in the ship. My father has, in particular, not just the Titanic, but the other sister ships as well. But for someone from Belfast, I was born in Belfast on the 1st of September 1985. The pride I feel that this ship was built in my home city, it's really quite something. Of course, at the time, not to give a history lesson here, but there was a great maritime race between Germany and Britain, which Britain temporarily won with the great liners. Germany, of course, produced many great liners as well, but that was kind of a competition at that time. Now, the epic tale of Titanic would still be epic without this film. So, in a sense, it doesn't need the Cameron blockbuster to do that. The reason I'm giving the history here is I think it's important to understand in the context of the film. I always feel an emotional connection to historic films, if they're done well, that is, in a way that I could never feel for a film that has no human context, in the sense of, let me, and this is where I'm going to be quoting other films, might annoy some people, but take Star Wars, for example. Now, Star Wars is clearly an impressive film. It was pioneering use of special effects. It was it was an epic film in its own right. Great soundtrack. But I could never ever be emotionally attached to a film like Star Wars in the way I would with Titanic. Historic epics always get to me, and none more so than Titanic. Because I mean, my great grandfather helped build it, among many others, but he helped to build it, and so to see the impact that film had, it's really moves me. It was an ensemble cast: Leonardo DiCaprio, Kate Winslet, Billy Zane, Francis Fisher, Victor Garber, Bernard Hill, um, I'm just going to go through this because I don't want to miss out any of the names here, or at least of the leading cast members. Jonathan Hyde, Danny Nucci, Gloria Stewart. In fact, Gloria Stewart was the oldest nominee in a supporting role. David Warner, Bill Paxton, many others. Um, Hundreds, if not thousands, of extras. Uh, Cost 200 million to make, and it made a box office revenue at the time of 1.8 billion. In 2012, when it was re-released, that record was broken. I mean, it surpassed its own revenue, going up to about 2.3 billion. For a long time, it was in number one position until Avatar was made, also directed by Cameron, and that's just been surpassed this year by the latest Avengers film. So Titanic's now in third position. Some of the other great films of history, like Gone with the Wind, adjusted for inflation, also rank very high. But I actually think, to me, the fact that Titanic's now in third position makes no difference because we're now in an era of big budget films. So for a film to surpass 1 billion is not that unusual today, particularly within the universe of comic book, Marvel comics, that sort of those sort of films. There seems to be a trend of them doing very well. So this Avengers film, that record's probably going to be broken in a few years. So for me, it doesn't make a difference if Titanic goes down to fifth place or sixth place. It will always have held the record at the time, just as Gone with the Wind did. Titanic was a record breaker. It tied with Something About Eve for most Academy Award nominations at 14. It tied with Ben-Hur for most wins at 11. And it was the most expensive film ever made at that point in terms of the budget. Um, if I can just look at some of the other films that are often named among the greatest, Gone with the Wind, Citizen Kane, um, Star Wars. These are the sort of films that are often named up there as among the greatest ever made. Ben-Hur was very successful. I haven't seen that one actually, although I've seen most of the others. Now, Gone with the Wind is a very impressive film. That who can ever forget that epic opening? But it's a very long film, and I think it's somewhat archaic looking now. I don't mean in the sense of the usage of Technicolor was impressive, but it's definitely Southern propaganda. Great film as it is, there's definitely a Southern bias there. Um, what you get in Titanic is multi-dimensional characters. You get a situation where it basically the Titanic story, the real ship, I mean, symbolized the best and the worst of the 20th century. It was early in the century, and it kind of foretold what was to come. The 20th century is often seen as the greatest and the worst century in human history. Now, the Titanic symbolized the greatest aspirations of mankind, but also some of the greatest failures, the class divides. It had great heroism and cowardice. It had It had love affairs, even without Jack and Rose. And this film, even without the Jack and Rose subplot, which is very important, obviously, for the film, it would still be an epic. But when you consider every factor, when you consider what makes a great film, Titanic has it all. It has it all. Believe it or not, it even has some funny scenes, which is something that isn't often considered because obviously it's a disaster film. But there are some more light-hearted, humorous scenes, at least one-liners. And I think people who criticize it, one of the critiques is that it's too sad, it's too depressing. I'm not sure I agree with that. It is definitely a tearjerker, but it doesn't have the absolute bleak outlook in the way that a great film like Schindler's List has, or Atonement for that matter. What Titanic has, yes, there's a tragedy. Yes, there's horrendous scenes. The steerage passengers being trapped below deck and so on. But actually, the very end of the film is on and up because you see Rose leading her life as she would do the way Jack would want her to be her best self. And that is very powerful. It just gets me every time. And if anything, I'm finding it even more powerful as time goes on. It's not aging. It's getting more powerful. And I tell you something, well, I'll save this for the end, but basically, for me, Titanic has everything. It has the great epic love story, star-crossed lovers, and that's been done in many films, but the performances of DiCaprio and Winslet just make it. I mean, today it's impossible to see anyone else in those roles. Um, Apparently, Kate Winslet really, really pushed hard to get the role of Rose, and DiCaprio. You can't see anyone else in the role. There were other names. Matthew McConaughey was one. Billy Crudup was another. But who else can you see as Jack Dawson now? Um, the score I think cannot be underestimated in the power of the film. The music score. I mean, my goodness, I'm not just talking about My Heart Will Go On, Celine Dion's vocals, but the pieces of music like Ocean of Memories, Never an Absolution. The power that those tracks have are just immense to me. I just cannot think of any other film with such a powerful score. Although there's other great films, Gangs of New York, for example, is an epic film. It had a good score as well, but I can't think of anything that comes close to Titanic. And that includes Gone with the Wind, it includes Gangs of New York, Raging Bull, they're all films known for having great scores. Citizen Kane I've never seen. I need to see it. But I just think when you weigh up everything, Titanic has it all. Now, I think people are critical in part because it was so successful, because it's mainstream in a sense. So they almost feel they need to be judgmental or critical simply because it's popular. It's a kind of snobby thing, I think. It's popular, so there must be something wrong with it. That's kind of the mentality. And yet, if you look at this film, it wasn't without controversy. I mean, I have issues about the way Bruce Ismay was unfairly portrayed, although that's something that's been done in all the films about Titanic. Um, and the Murdoch scene remains controversial, where First Officer Murdoch killed himself. But, a film of that scope and scale is always going to have something. Gone with the Wind had its controversies. All the great films do. It may be my Belfast connection. It may be the fact I was born on the day the ship was rediscovered. It may be that. And it's also the historic pull. Gettysburg, Gangs of New York, those sort of films move me profoundly. But nothing comes close to Titanic because the cinematography, the way it's put together, the timing of each scene, the even the way the sinking scene isn't just rushed through, it's done gradually. You feel the impending fear, you feel the impending doom. Then you hear the band playing to the end. Um, then you have Rose on the lifeboat. I mean, that's those scenes are so memorable. Where she's looking up at the night sky, singing that song "Come Josephine" in your flying machine, and it's just it gets me every time. And even the modern scenes with Bill Paxton's character, the oceanographer, and it's a masterpiece. It is simply a masterpiece. And I'll close with this because I need to think about time. A few reasons, like I say, it's that historic connection. It's my Belfast connections. It's the score of the film, it's the acting, it's the cast, it's the character build up, it's the multi-dimensional aspects of the characters. Even Cal, one could argue, is not entirely a villain because there's one scene, for example, you kind of think, well, maybe he has some care for Rose after all. It's a masterpiece. It has every aspect of the human character, of the human condition. And the Titanic story, both the real event and the film encompass all the best and worst of human qualities. It's got it all. It's got it all. Um, and I don't think, put it this way, if in my lifetime, I'm only 34, if another director produces a film or another producer produces a film that has the impact Titanic has, I can simply say that person would be an absolute genius. I believe James Cameron is a genius because what he produced with this is timeless. People could watch this 70 years from now and it will be timeless. The actors will get older, but this will be timeless. It's just quite simply the greatest film ever made. And I know it's got competition, and I respect the competition. Gone with the Wind, Citizen Kane, Shawshank Redemption, great films. Shawshank, incidentally, is a great film. It was hugely underrated, but it doesn't have everything in it. I mean, where's the romantic love story? That's not there. Has friendship, it has loyalty, has great philosophy. Titanic has it all, and that is why I have no hesitation in saying I believe Titanic, directed by James Cameron, is the greatest film ever made. Thank you for watching.